130 Americans die every day from an overdose involving prescription opioids. Many have been due to OxyContin, a painkiller that's been marketed for years as harmless and non-addictive. Purdue Pharma is the maker of the drug and at the center of America's opioid crisis. On Tuesday, it agreed to a $270 million settlement to resolve a lawsuit brought by the state of Oklahoma.
And we intend to hold those companies responsible for the mess that they've made here in the state. So this is just one piece of what, again, I would describe as a comprehensive approach that the state is taking to deal with the epidemic and its fallout.
The settlement is the first in a wave of nearly 2,000 lawsuits filed against Purdue and other drug makers. They're accused of deceptively playing down the risk of addiction from their products while overstating the benefits.
So for over 100 years, the medical community in the United States, and indeed throughout the world, was well aware that opioids like oxycodone and hydrocodone are highly addictive. Purdue changed that perception through a devious but very effective marketing campaign.
More than 400,000 Americans died from an overdose involving prescription opioids from 1999 to 2017. The number of annual fatalities has quadrupled over the same period, reaching a record 48,000 deaths in 2017 alone. The US government said the economic cost of the opioid crisis was more than $500 billion in 2015, or nearly 3% of GDP.
It's a terrible, terrible economic burden, and it's our hope that we can force these companies, as the Attorney General of Oklahoma has done for his state, to make substantial contributions to the communities in order to pay these enormous costs that are necessary to bring our nation back to a state of relative health.
Purdue denies any wrongdoing. It argues its drugs carried warnings about the risk of abuse. But it's agreed to pay more than $120 million to help fund an addiction treatment center in Oklahoma. The company's owner, the Sackler family, will contribute $75 million. The billionaire family is among the world's top philanthropists. But a rising backlash against how it made its fortune has caused several organizations to refuse its donations. Claims in the Oklahoma suit are still pending against Johnson & Johnson and Israel-based Teva. But the Purdue settlement is seen as providing some relief from skyrocketing healthcare costs involving opioid addiction. Sibel Karkus, TRT World.
And Nicolas Terry joins us now from Indianapolis. He's the Executive Director at Indiana University's Center for Law and Health. Welcome to the program, Nicolas. Firstly, can you, before we delve deeper into the Purdue settlement, can you tell us a bit more about America's opioid crisis? When did it begin, and just how bad is it right now?
Well, it probably dates back at least 15 or so years. The real opioid overdose crisis became visible around that time when we started seeing huge death tolls from the overdose and realized that we had a new and quite devastating public health crisis on our hands.
And how would you describe the current state of this crisis?
Well, the current state is we have seen a very slight blip downwards in the death toll, but that's not true of all states. We also think that this addictions crisis will morph into other crises. We're already seeing, for example, far less use of prescription opioids, which is the subject of this litigation, and far more use of street opioids, such as fentanyl, imported from Mexico or from China.
So let's look further into Purdue Pharma's $270 million settlement with the state of Oklahoma. How significant is this deal, and what does it mean for similar cases around America?
Well, certainly it's a new benchmark. 270 million is of a different order from the other settlements that states entered into with Purdue a few years ago. And $270 million sounds a lot for just one state. But if you consider, as your intro piece did, the overall cost to the U.S. economy of maybe $1 trillion so far, and estimates of another 500 billion by 2020. These kinds of settlements, even if they were to recur across multiple states, would still be a relatively small drop in the bucket. There are also relatively small drops in the bucket when you compare the settlement numbers with the millions of dollars of profit that these companies have made from these allegedly deceptive marketing techniques and from their failure to monitor the distribution chain.
Before this settlement, Purdue Pharma had argued that its products were clearly labelled with warnings that these opioids could cause addiction and warned users not to abuse them. Is that a firm leg to stand on legally?
Well, the case has never been easy. Not only were there warnings, though clearly the way the plaintiffs are arguing the case is that although those warnings were made, Purdue operated silently, quietly to market against those very warnings. But the other issue is that, of course, these are approved by the Food and Drug Administration. These drugs are legal. This is quite different, therefore, from something like the tobacco litigation that we saw in the 1990s, where you're dealing with a product that was generally viewed as unsafe and was not approved by the federal government for sale.
We're clearly seeing the tide turning against these pharmaceutical companies. Oklahoma and other states around the US are blaming them for this crisis. How culpable do you think these companies are?
Well, I think the first place you have to look is, I think, May 28th, the Oklahoma case is going on against the co-defendants who are left after Purdue dropped out with the settlement. And the companies that are left are larger companies with deeper pockets. And you'd have to, if you were representing them, you would have to be concerned that the expression we use in the United States is someone might be left holding the bag and would be responsible for large amounts. What happens in other states that maybe have, for example, much larger populations than Oklahoma, that have, for example, higher death tolls from the prescription opioids than Oklahoma? What kind of additional sums will those states expect to be provided by the defendants? And then, again, as your introductory piece pointed out, in federal court in Cleveland, Ohio, there is a consolidation of 1,600 other cases that require some kind of settlement.
Okay, Nicolas Terry, we'll have to leave it there, but thank you again for your time tonight.